The Miami Hurricanes went 5-7 in Mario Cristobal's first year. They come into the season unranked, they picked fifth in the ACC this year, and they also are expected, to have more wins. The projected win total right now is sitting at 7.5 going into the year. David, simply put, what would you consider a successful season for Miami in 2023?
Yeah, successful to me would be like a 9-3 type of year. I think that would show an impressive step forward year over year. 9-3 in the regular season gives you a chance to go win 10 games if you win the bowl game. I think that would be a nice step forward. Now, that's not what I would necessarily predict for this team to do, which is probably why I would deem that a successful season. Also, too, I think it's important, Chris, to play the brand of football that is going to attract big-time recruits, show the ability to be explosive through the air, put defensive backs on islands and man coverage, and show big-time cornerback recruits that you're willing to play that style of defensive football. And so to me, 9-3 allows you to land a top 10 recruiting class potentially once again. And to me, at the end of the day, in this Mario Cristobal era, that's where things are most important, is improving the talent and roster through talent acquisition. And so 9-3 would be good results on the field. And I think that also allows you to continue to stack talent.
David, when we brought this up again, we've not discussed how we were going to answer this. There's two things, and two things for me, for Miami to have a successful season, to essentially at the end of the year view it as a successful year, and one of it has to do with what you just mentioned. But first off, when I was thinking about this, I thought about maybe the way you thought of it, of an exact record. Again, 7.5 is the win projection, the over/under total there. For me, I kind of looked at it, maybe not necessarily on the actual win total, but for me, a successful year in terms of the record is to clearly be the number 3 team in the ACC. Look, I think everyone expects Clemson and Florida State. They're just right now ahead of Miami with where Miami's at right now. So if you just take those two teams, they're just out in front at this moment, further ahead, obviously with Clemson and its history. But with what Florida State did last year, bringing back the quarterback, they're expected to do well again this year. So for me, if Miami can essentially cement themselves as the clear-cut number 3 team in the ACC, I think that's a win. I think that's a successful year, and then you build on it moving forward, whatever that number might be. If it's 8 wins, 9, 10, but just clearly be the number 3 team in the ACC. And I know a lot of Miami fans, hey, you got to win a championship or it's not successful, and that's fine. But Miami has not done that since they joined the conference nearly 20 years ago. So I think you can take steps in this process of having a successful year. The second thing, just real quick, the second thing I want to mention for me is to what you were saying. I think a successful season for this year is to show that you can have a good year, or you feel good about 2024, whatever that might be. If it's the brand of football, as you're mentioning, if it's enough players and for this year that will be returning for the next year, I think you just want to feel good about 2024. It feels like a lot of guys are going to leave. A lot of guys are projected to be drafted. Tyler Van Dyke will have a decision clearly. So if you're starting over with a new quarterback, if you've got some other pieces to fill, even if you have a good year this year, you don't want to have a step back, because we've seen so many times year after year, even if Miami does win 9, for example, they take that step back at these head coaches and they get 7 wins, and essentially they're not here anymore. So for me, they've got to build, they've got to feel good about 2024.
Yeah, I like your take as third best team in the ACC. I think that's fair. I think it's interesting too, because you could, off the top of my head, I don't know, you could argue 5, 6. You could make legitimate arguments for 5, 6, 7 teams could be that third team. I'm curious, like, who would you slot as the third team going into this season?
Well, I like North Carolina with Drake May. I think Pitt is certainly a very interesting team. Louisville had the higher win projection totals. So we've talked about the quarterback breakdown, but I like Duke's team. I don't like Duke's schedule. I think it's difficult for them to navigate to essentially be the clear-cut number 3, but I do like Duke's team. I like Riley Leonard. We've talked about that. I actually like him a little bit more than you do. And the coach with Elko there. So again, I don't remember exactly how many teams you named, but I think everyone else, or a lot of teams, except for what we've seen at the bottom with Virginia, is certainly down there. Virginia Tech's not expected to be good, BC, but there's a lot of teams that have the potential to be that number three. For me, it's Drake May, it's North Carolina. I understand the defense, I understand the playmakers, but again, I like with what they have. To me, going into the year, I still have them as the number three team. And I think Miami, again, if they kind of fall short, if they're middle of the pack in the ACC, it's hard for me, even if they win more games than they did a year ago, to really view that as a successful year.
Yeah, one thing that I think is interesting this week on 24/7 Sports, they released their team talent composite. Miami amongst the ACC teams was number 2. And again, talent is just, to me, it's a measurement of potential. And Miami has a long ways to go to be the number 2 team in the ACC to me at this point, at the start of the season here. But it does show, I think, how that potential is there to be the third best team. That's why Mario Cristobal was brought in, to make these type of leaps and getting the program to where it should be. And getting that leap, getting to the third best team in the ACC would be a strong mark in his rebuild.
Yeah, and David, we talk about this all the time with all these coaches that come through this program. Look, at some point you got to win games. Look, you can't win 5, 6, 7 and still expect to be here. So whether it's this year, next year, I mean, certainly he's going to have to win games. You can't keep relying on recruiting in the future. Eventually you've got to, produce wins and losses on that left-hand side of the column. You've got to win games. And whether that, I think Miami fans are expecting more wins this year. Certainly, I did a stat posted on the website about teams that lost 7 games in 2021, what they did in 2022. I found it to be interesting. Really took a look at the Power 5 conference teams. And look, 63% of those teams won more games. They had better seasons the following year. In the ACC, we saw Duke have the big year. Florida State, obviously, they made the big jump. So certainly it's possible to have a big year to get to that 9-win mark, as you mentioned. Certainly that's a goal. We've not seen Miami teams go from 5 to 9 very often. But I was listening to Jesse Palmer, national analyst, said it to your point about Miami on paper does have some talent. So we will see how it plays out. We've not seen the season, the length of the season, the totality of the week by week. We've not seen that add up to a lot of wins. And that's been the problem of just navigating a season with whatever that might be, whether it's injuries, a tough loss, playing on the road, a Thursday, Friday, whatever that might be. They're just not navigated the season very well. And I think that'll be the big challenge because, you've got to win games. That's what it takes.
No doubt. And coming off last year, big step forward is expected. Lots of turnover on the roster and the coaching staff. And, each year is a new opportunity. We'll see if Miami can take that type of big leap here in 2023.
And lastly, before we wrap this part up, bowl game, I've been big on that. I felt like if they could just win the bowl game, get to a bowl game, but win it, I think that has just set yourself up for potential momentum in the offseason. Maybe that's what it goes to when I said to feel good about 2024. Maybe it's a bowl game win. We've just not seen a lot of those over the last 15 years. And when they did win last time, they did win the bowl game. They won their next 10 games in 2017. So they really vaulted themselves with momentum. And we've just not seen that as an opportunity. So that might be something to watch for, regardless of record, but go to a bowl game and win it.